I put the tax forms on top of your to-do pile a month ago.
I have a to-do pile? Marge, how many kids do we have? Oh, no time to count. I'll just estimate. 9.
Homer, you know we don't have...
Shut up, shut up. If I don't hear you, it's not illegal. Okay, I need some deductions. Oh, business gifts! Here you go. Keep using nuclear power.
It's that time of year again, tax time. You may leave behind a lot of things when you retire, but your obligation to Uncle Sam isn't one of them. With new tax laws in place, the question becomes, is your nest egg as safe as it could be from excess taxation? It's that time again, time to tune out the hype and focus on the facts. Yes, facts that matter to you, the income generation. Let's get started. Get ready to separate reality from myth.
With us, David Scranton.
David Scranton.
David Scranton.
David Scranton.
But David Scranton says, hey, not so fast.
How does it affect the markets? How does it affect the economy? Thanks to efficiencies in new technology and a staff of veteran analysts and portfolio managers, Sound Income Strategies strives to set new standards and bring institutional-style investing to your portfolio. I'm David Scranton. Let's do a little bit of word association for a moment if we can. What's the first word you think of when I say taxes? Well, if I had to guess, some of your responses might be something like painful, unfair, complicated. I doubt anyone would say fun. And yes, taxes can be all of those things, but since there's no ignoring them or completely avoiding them, legally anyway, it's in your best interest to understand your obligations as well as your tax savings options. Now that's especially true during and just before retirement. So what are the tax rules and commitments that apply to different types of retirement income? And how have things changed for retirees and near retirees under the Trump administration's new tax code? And also, are there changes you can or should make to avoid paying more taxes than you need to in retirement? We're going to tackle these questions and many others on today's show. But first, let's review how some of the most popular investment vehicles and the most popular sources of retirement income are taxed. Now, when I say tax, most people tend to think of income tax, leading to questions about the concept of investing for income as a retirement strategy. And it's reasonable, yes, but the reality is this: regardless of your financial strategy, just about any type of income you receive in retirement will be taxed. Therefore, the best you can do is to strategize with the help of your financial advisor. Why? To make sure that you're not paying more taxes than you legally have to. And strategies to help you do that are as possible and effective with an income-based investment model as they are with any other model. The difference is this: with investing for income, you have the added benefit of knowing your approach reduces the risk of potential loss, not only due to excessive taxation, but also due to market volatility as well as spend down. We'll get into the specifics of some tax saving strategies later in the show, but right now let's review some of the most common types of retirement income and how each one of these is ultimately taxed. As many people know, if your only source of retirement income is Social Security, you probably won't pay any taxes because Social Security income by itself is tax exempt. Of course, the reality is that Social Security isn't nearly enough to meet most people's needs, and especially most people's goals in retirement. You need additional income. You need other sources of income. And once you have those other sources, then most typically a portion of your Social Security income ends up being subject to taxation. Now, there's a formula for determining how much of your Social Security income is taxable, and the amount of income that is taxable from Social Security can be anywhere up to 85%. Retirees with a high amount of monthly pension income, for example, would likely pay that 85%, and their total tax rate could run anywhere from 12 all the way up to 37% on the federal level. Now, as for pensions, most pension accounts are funded with pre-tax income. If that's the case, it means the entire amount of your annual pension income will be included on your return as taxable income each and every year. If, on the other hand, a portion of your pension account was funded with after-tax dollars, then each year part of your pension income will be taxable and part of it will not be. As for investment income in the form of dividends, interest, or capital gains, obviously you'll have to pay taxes on that as you did before you retired. And what if you should systematically sell investments to generate retirement income? Well, in that case, each sale would generate a long-term or a short-term capital gain, or possibly a capital loss, which would have to be reported on your tax return. Now, of course, if you're a regular viewer of this show, you know this is the last strategy that I'd recommend for anyone whose goal it is to generate retirement income. And the hit that you take at tax time is just one of the reasons why. Now, not every source of cash flow from investments is counted as taxable income. For example, let's say you had a bank CD that matured in the amount of $10,000. That $10,000, if you're withdrawing the principal to supplement your cash flow, does not count as income that needs to be reported on your tax return. Why? Because it's your principal. You see, only the interest that it earned is ultimately subject to taxation and must be reported. Now, for most people, the main source of retirement income outside Social Security will be money that you have in 401ks or IRAs. Those accounts, of course, are tax deferred until you decide that you want to begin taking withdrawals, typically at retirement time. The amount of tax you pay on those withdrawals depends on the total amount of income and deductions that you have, as well as what tax bracket that you're in for that particular year. Now, for example, if you have a year with more deductions than income, such as a year with a lot of medical expenses, let's say, then you may not pay taxes on withdrawals for that year. And most people know, even if you have sufficient retirement income from other sources, such as a pension, for example, you will still eventually have to withdraw money from your IRAs, as well as your 401ks and other qualified accounts, to satisfy these pesky things known as required minimum distributions. These RMDs exist specifically to force you to pay taxes on these accounts at some point during your life. And they kick in at age 70 and a half and apply to all traditional IRAs, all traditional 401ks, 403bs, and pension type accounts. We'll talk more about why having the right strategy for satisfying your RMDs without spending down your principal is, in my experience, perhaps one of the, if not the single most important component of a successful retirement plan. But are there options beyond traditional IRAs and 401ks that might have advantages when it comes to retirement taxation? Well, depending upon your situation and your goals, the answer very well could be yes. And we'll talk about that more also in just a bit. Now it's time to welcome our first guest, financial advisor, Eddie Gabor. You've probably seen him around on networks like Fox Business and CNBC. Eddie's the co-owner of Key Advisors Group in Delaware. He's also the author of the brand spanking new book, Common Sense Bull. Eddie, thanks for joining us again today here on The Income Generation.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, I don't know if you remember this or not. I don't know if some of you remember this, and hopefully do, but we had our market forecast show right around the first of the year where we came on and we had almost 10 advisors actually talking about what they thought would happen this year with the market. And Eddie, in the spirit of the book, The Common Sense Bull, you were the bull that day. But the rest of us that were being interviewed thought you were full of bull because you were the one person who said the market would go up in 2019 versus go down. And you remember what you predicted, what percentage you thought the market would actually increase this year in 2019?
It's funny you ask. I think I do remember that. I
Okay.
said I thought the markets would go up by 12% this year.
By 12%.
That's correct.
And as of today, do you happen to know where the markets are relative to the beginning of the year?
As of today, the S&P happens to be just a hair over 12%.
Here over 12%.
That's correct.
So right now, you're looking like the smartest guy in the room, and I hate to give you so much credit for that since it's my show, but I kind of have to. But you do realize that in this volatile market, it means that the market really can't move for the rest of the year. It means for the last 9 months of the year, the market's got to just stay like this, like flatline. So what's your best vision as to what's going to happen? Clearly, I jest. We're not, we know the market's not going to stay flatline. Do you still think that the market's going to end the year right where it is today, thereabouts? And if so, how do you think it's going to get there? Do you think it's going to go up and then go down? Do you think it's going to go down and then go up? What are you seeing right now in the tea leaves now that we're almost 3 full months into the year?
I think we've gotten a little bit ahead of ourselves on a short-term standpoint from the market. I mean, we've gotten a year's worth of growth that we anticipated in less than 3 months. So I expect to see more sideways to downwards action in the market here on the short term until we get clarity with China in regards to trade. I think now that the market is up 12, we will not see we'll see volatility for sure, but I think now I may have to up my prediction up a couple percentage points.
Now, the most important question I have for you, and this is really the most important, so you ready to answer this question?
Yes.
Okay. Did you happen to send, regarding his prediction, a thank you note, a personal handwritten thank you note to Jerome Powell? Because, you know, if it weren't for him pulling off the accelerator and raising short-term rates, I think the other 8 of us would have been correct.
I agree 100% with you. So that's part of the reason for our bullish call heading into the year.
Right.
We think the Fed is off the table, maybe 1 rate hike this year in the second half, and that's it. And that's bullish for equities.
So part of the reason for the prediction was because you thought this would happen, so your thought was just that. Yeah, I kind of thought the same. Only I thought that 1 rate hike was actually going to have occurred already. I thought that would occur at the beginning of the year, and then we'd be one and done. So I was expecting at this point the markets to not be looking so good. So you talked about China. So the skeleton in the closet of the Fed and what they're going to do, I think we've got some clarity there, which is wonderful. But the next skeleton in the closet, really everybody's focused on, is China. What do you really think is going to happen there? You know, some people say it's going to happen. Some people say that the last thing China wants is President Trump to be in for another term, so they can do everything they can to kibosh such a deal.
I don't think we're going to get a quick resolution to this. I continue to see this thing stretching out for a comprehensive deal. So I think we're going to see bits and pieces of the trade issue with China being solved one piece at a time. But I think if a market watcher is expecting a comprehensive deal done at the end of March, I would not put a lot of weight behind that.
But you think it'll be enough, though? You think that just a little piece of good news, a little piece of hope along the way is enough to string along the market participants to keep the market at kind of sort of near its current levels?
I think by the end of the year, the answer to that will be yes. I think on a short-term basis, there will be some time periods where there's some doubt on China and U.S., and that's what will cause markets to go down.
Well, the bond market's definitely helping you as long as they keep the 10-year yield down around that 2.5, 2.6, 2.7 mark. You know, still going to be a lot of people looking for growth somewhere else, and it makes the dividends on stocks still look pretty attractive. So when we come back, we want to ask Eddie some tough questions here about interest rates, but also about taxes, because our show is about taxes. So stay with us. We'll be back in a moment. And when we come back, you're going to learn how you can get a copy of Eddie's book, Common Sense Bull. We'll be right back here on The Income Generation.
David J. Scranton, Amazon bestselling author, money manager, and national TV host, is on a mission to educate baby boomers about the need to shift from growth to income. If you're at or near retirement, focusing on income over growth can make all the difference in the quality of your retirement. Each week, David educates America on his Newsmax TV show, The Income Generation, where he provides special reports and more to teach baby boomers about the income model.
Call now for a free copy of David's latest book. Go to soundincomestrategies.com/income to find out more.
So when it comes to taxes, what would be the perfect investment? Well, the answer, in theory at least, is one that allows you to make pre-tax contributions, then doesn't have any tax obligations on your interest or your capital gains as it's earned, i.e. gross tax deferred. But finally, that would eventually allow you to withdraw that money completely income tax free. Sounds good, right? In fact, it is. It's actually too good to be true. And that's why, unfortunately, no such thing exists. Now, the closest thing, or one of the closest things, is a 401k, which explains why they've been in the retirement savings of choice for most workers over the past 30 years or so. With your 401k, you do get the first benefit. You get to make pre-tax contributions. You do get the second benefit. Your money grows tax deferred. But unfortunately, the third benefit, the tax-free withdrawals, you do not get. You must pay taxes on virtually every dime that you withdraw. So, it's almost perfect. 2 out of 3 is not terrible. And the same is true of most other traditional IRAs. The analogy I always use for these accounts is of a farmer being given the choice of paying taxes on the seed he plants or the crop that he sells after the harvest. With a 401k or traditional IRA, you're choosing to wait and to pay taxes on the harvest and getting your seed tax-free, at least initially. Though you know you'll eventually have to pay, in the meantime, your money's compounding. It's accumulating interest that hasn't yet been taxed. So it's a bit like getting an interest-free loan from the government in a way. As for the other option, a farmer choosing to pay taxes on the seed and then being able to reap the entire harvest tax-free would be the equivalent of a Roth IRA. In fact, in many ways, a Roth IRA is the opposite of a 401k. You don't get to make those pre-tax contributions, but you do get to allow it to grow tax-deferred, like the 401k, but then you also get to withdraw the money completely income tax-free. As for which option might be better for an individual investor depends upon several factors. For example, there's the question of how much you or your advisor believes tax rates are likely to increase before you withdraw your money. If it's only going to increase by a little bit, then perhaps a traditional tax-deferred vehicle like a 401k might make the most sense. But if you think tax rates are going to actually increase by a lot, say a tax jump from 30% all the way to 50%, then one could certainly make the argument that a Roth IRA might make more sense. Now, related to that question, this question of tax rates, that is the question of how much time you have to let your savings grow before you have to start taking withdrawals. Will it be 30 years or will it be 10 years? The more time you have, the greater odds of tax rates seeing a significant increase. So, to try to put it simply, if you have a lot of time for your money to grow and or you think tax rates are going to go up significantly between now and retirement, then paying taxes on the seed and being able to withdraw the harvest completely tax-free might make the most sense. In other words, using a Roth IRA might be your best saving strategy from a tax perspective. But there's another variable to consider, which is that a Roth IRA has more limitations on who can use it and how much they can contribute. You see, Roth IRA contribution limits for this year, 2019, are $6,000 if you're under age 50 and $7,000 if you're over age 50. Plus, if your income is over a certain threshold, for single taxpayers, that's $135,000, then you're simply not eligible to open a Roth IRA at all. So, does that mean that you're completely out of luck if you and your advisor have decided that paying money on the seed rather than the harvest makes more sense? Are there other options that can do the same thing beside a Roth IRA? Well, there kind of sort of indirectly is. One example is a certain type of cash value life insurance. And it's a type that many affluent individuals use specifically because they are phased out of the ability to do Roth IRAs. You see, with life insurance, you could take a whole life, or in some cases even a universal life policy, and contribute extra money to it over and above the basic premium, up to certain limits. Now that extra money actually goes 100% or almost 100% into the actual cash value as an investment. Not the death benefit, but the cash value. And as long as you stay within those prescribed limits, then the benefits are as follows. Even though you're contributing after-tax dollars, you do not have to pay any tax on accumulation interest or on gains because it's all tax deferred. And you do not have to pay taxes on certain withdrawals, or for that matter, any strategically structured policy loans. And if these loans are structured properly with the help of the right advisor, you should never, ever, ever have to pay them back during your lifetime, meaning that you essentially get to take tax-free cash flow for the rest of your life. It's only after death that the loan is repaid from the tax-free death benefit. Ultimately, in this case, your advisor has, in essence, helped you strategically engineer a Roth IRA through a life insurance policy. And yes, this is just one example of how the right advisor can help you make the right choices for minimizing your retirement tax burden, oftentimes with options that you may not even be aware of. Of course, a lot of things have changed on the tax front recently. So the question becomes, how exactly might those changes impact retirees and near retirees specifically? Well, you guessed it. We're going to talk more about that in just a minute. Right now it's time to welcome back Eddie Gabor, co-founder of Key Advisors Group in Delaware, and also the author of the new book coming out on Tuesday, Common Sense Bull. Eddie, thanks for sticking around.
Thank you.
You know, during the commercial break, I dozed off for a minute and I had this terrible, terrible dream that actually admitted you were the smartest guy in the room. Did I actually say that, or was that just a bad dream?
I think you said it, and I think we have it recorded.
I think it's recorded, exactly. Oh, well. So the long-term interest rates, talk about the 10-year Treasury yield. Do you think that's going to stay low? Do you think we're in a new norm of low interest rates like Japan has struggled with for the last 25 or 30 years?
So it's too hard in this crazy time to predict very long-term on rates. I have a very high conviction that the 10-year note is going to stay low for 19. That's part of the reason why the Fed's not going to raise rates, because they do not want an inverted yield curve.
Of course. Yeah.
We get a lot of demand for our bonds because although our rates are still low in our eyes, globally, we have some of the highest interest rates out there, and the U.S. is looked at as the safest paper around the globe. So we got a lot of international demand that keeps a ceiling on that 10-year bond, and that's very bullish for equities.
That's very bullish, absolutely. Okay, so taxes. If you had, since this show's about taxes, if you had one thing to tell our viewers that you find to be a popular strategy today with the new tax code, people approaching retirement who are retired, what might that one strategy be?
I tell you, with this new tax code, people are in, many of our clients at least, are in the lowest tax bracket they've ever been in their entire life. So we are actually aggressively looking at Roth conversions for our clients. Now, it's not suitable for everybody, as we know, but I will probably do more Roth conversion planning this year than I have in my entire 20-year career. I mean, my gosh, if you can take taxable money that you thought was going to be taxed at 20% and pull it out at 12 and have it grow tax-free for you and your family, for most of our clients, we call that a no-brainer.
Yeah, married couples today can make $100,000, take the standard deduction, and still be paying tax at the 12% bracket, which is huge. So last but certainly not least, in the minute or so we have left in this block, tell our viewers why you wrote Common Sense Bull, what they can expect to get from it when they read it, and how they can get a copy of this great new book, Common Sense Bull.
So I want to educate and empower investors. I was motivated to do this book by my coaches and mentors to share the powerful message that we've been sharing with clients for 20 years. And my hope is this book will not only educate them.
So you started when you were 13, right?
Yeah, that's right, 12. My hope is this book will not only educate but motivate people to use the same principles we use to make our correct market calls in their financial plan.
That's great. That's great. And I love what you've written. I got to see a manuscript of it before it actually got published officially, so I'm a bit ahead of the curve. Where can they find a copy of Common Sense Bull?
They can go on Amazon.com to buy the book. They can go to Barnes & Noble, and they can go to thecommonsensebowl.com to also purchase the book.
All right. Well, if the best I got on the list was number 2 on Amazon.com, and he earns his way to number 1, I think that's a great thing, because I love your book. So I'm glad you did it. God bless you, my friend. And you heard it, Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com for a copy of Common Sense Bull. Stay with us. We'll be back in a moment with more here on The Income Generation. I'm David Scranton. We'll be right back.
For behind-the-scenes photos, retirement planning tips, and upcoming giveaways, follow The Income Generation Show on Facebook. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel to watch video clips, guest interviews, and to catch up on past episodes.
We've talked quite a bit here on The Income Generation about the potential impact of the Trump administration's new tax code, the impact on the overall economy, as well as the financial markets. We focused a little bit less on its impacts on individual taxpayers. But with April 15th fast approaching, there are some things about the changes that retirees and near retirees in particular need to be aware of. As you probably know, the new tax code maintains 7 individual tax brackets, but at slightly different rates from before. The rates are 10%, 12%, 22%, 24%, 32%, 35%, and finally 37%. Also, as you probably know, the standard deduction has doubled from $6,350 to $12,000 for individuals, and from $12,700 to $24,000 for married couples filing jointly. Now, another major change is that deductions on state and local income taxes, that is SALT, have new limits. That change is taking some heat now that Americans who used to get tax rebates are discovering that with those and other new deduction restrictions, they're not getting a rebate this year at all. In fact, some are finding that they have to actually pay into the system for the first time in years. Now, fortunately for many, including many older Americans, the limits on itemized deductions aren't as radical as originally proposed. For example, several groups like AARP and the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys, among others, successfully fought a proposal to eliminate the medical expense deduction. They argued ending the deduction could have caused serious harm to many seniors who have high medical or long-term care costs. Nevertheless, some major itemizers could still see their taxes increase under the new code. And this group usually includes many older taxpayers in places with high state and local income and property taxes. So, with the new cap on these SALT deductions, elimination of the personal exemption, the doubling of standard deduction, and other factors, tax experts say that there's another important consideration for older filers to keep in mind. And that is deduction bunching. Essentially, bunching your deductions means that you pay 2 years' worth of deductible costs in 1 year so that you can itemize them on that year's return. Then the following year, you simply take the standard deduction. For example, you could pay all of your real estate taxes for 2008 in 2018, and if the 2019 fiscal tax year for the town you live in began in 2018, you can also pay next year's tax bill. In addition to property taxes, other types of deductions you can consider bunching include medical expenses and charitable contributions. Now, while this strategy requires you to think about your taxes 2 years at a time, the upshot is that you're less likely to miss out on the tax breaks that could come with itemizing. So let's say, for example, you normally pay $9,000 in mortgage interest, and you get an $8,000 property tax bill every year that's due the following January. Rather than wait until January, you could choose to pay before December 31st. Even though you've already paid this year's property tax bill, in essence what you've done is you've bunched these payments. And essentially, you've paid $19,000 in property taxes for 1 year, and $10,000 of which is deductible. Now let's say you donate $5,000 every year to your favorite nonprofit, but this year you donate initial $2,000 with anticipation of maybe donating just a little bit less the following year, meaning that you've given $7,000 in charitable contributions for this year. So adding up the deductible costs of your mortgage interest, your bunch property taxes, and charitable contributions, you end up with $25,000 that you could potentially take in itemized deductions for the year. Now, of course, the following year, you'll have only the remaining dollars in mortgage interest and the remaining $3,000 in charitable contributions to take as deductions. But it's really no problem because the next year, you can take the $24,000 standard deduction and come out ahead anyway. And here's another thing to consider. If your charitable contributions really are not deductible because you can no longer itemize, you might consider having them made directly from your IRA to your charity of choice. This has multiple benefits, and under the rule, which is called the Qualified Charitable Distributions Law, it can even work as a strategy for satisfying your required minimum distributions if you're over that age of 70 and a half years old. We'll talk more about RMDs. We'll talk more about some of the important issues that you should know about taxes and retirement coming up in just a bit.
David J. Scranton, Amazon bestselling author, money manager, and national TV host, is on a mission to educate baby boomers about the need to shift from growth to income. If you're at or near retirement, focusing on income over growth can make all the difference in the quality of your retirement. Each week, David educates America on his Newsmax TV show, The Income Generation, where he provides special reports and more to teach baby boomers about the income model.
Call now for a free copy of David's latest book. Go to soundincomestrategies.com/income to find out more.
If you're near or in retirement, head over to theincomegeneration.com and download your special report written specifically for the needs of the income generation. Again, those born before 1966. I'm David Scranton, and you've been watching The Income Generation. We'll see you all next Sunday.
my goal is really educating folks out there. I think in the media today, financial independence is something that's looked at as this impossible task that only a small percentage of people in the country can do. And I call bogus on that, because I think with the right approach, discipline, and right team around you, that financial independence is actually pretty easy. And in this book, I talk about that. I talk about the things that we look to do for clients and try to educate the investor on things they can do on their own. I talk a lot about my family in the beginning. You know, I'm a first-generation American. My family came here from Egypt many years ago, and so they came here with nothing. And I watched them work hard, and my brother and my sister and I lived a fantastic childhood thanks to all the work and effort they did to come here, barely knowing how to speak English, not a lot of money, and seeing them succeed. It was wonderful. And as I look back now, that's what drives me to try to be as successful as we can as a firm and be the absolute best. Is I always think back and think of my parents and how, as a child, watching them work so hard and sacrificing everything so that way we have a good life. And so I talk in the book as well about risk management strategies, the strategies that we focus on with individual investors that so much is overlooked. Anytime you put on CNBC, Fox Business, whatever it is, it's all about how high the stock market's going and you know, how wonderful it would be to find the next Facebook or the next Amazon. The reality is that's like going to the casino. There are proven approaches that you can take where you don't have to take a tremendous amount of risk to hit the level of success that you want. You just have to understand that it's not going to happen overnight. And I think that's a problem that some investors are so short-sighted, that this book tries to lay out core principles that you can use that will work over the long haul if you take a disciplined approach. And I firmly believe in having someone that you can call it a financial coach, an investment advisor, a family member, someone that will look you in the eye and tell you when you're going off course and is not afraid to hurt your feelings. Because I tell individuals, our job is not to tell you what you want to hear, it's to tell you the truth. So ultimately, why should someone go out and buy this book? The reason why it's titled The Common Sense Bull is I'm using common sense approaches that can be applicable to anybody. I think many people on TV overcomplicate financial independence, and it becomes intimidating to people. And they become intimidated, which means they don't do anything about it. This book, hopefully, puts it in a common sense perspective that anyone can use, no matter what your net worth is, what your age is, what stage of life you're in. And so that's why this book has the word common sense in the title, because I think anyone with the ambition to be successful and financially independent will be able to benefit from this book.
Earlier I mentioned that having a plan for satisfying your RMDs, your required minimum distributions, without spending down your principal was, in my experience, one of the, if not the most important factor in having a successful retirement strategy. Now, one of the most common mistakes that retirees make with their money is not allocating their assets properly to account for these RMDs. Now again, RMDs are as unavoidable as income taxes themselves, and the whole reason they exist is to essentially force you to finally pay taxes on your tax-deferred retirement accounts. So to go back to my farmer analogy, if you kept your money in a 401k or a traditional IRA, you've chosen to pay taxes on your harvested crops rather than the seeds you used to grow them. And rest assured, Uncle Sam isn't going to let you get away with not harvesting those crops. One reason many people fail to set up a good plan for their RMDs is that they see it as an issue that they can always deal with down the road. Now the trouble is, the road usually isn't quite as long as you think. With RMDs kicking in at age 70 and a half, that means that most people are 5 years or less into retirement when they start having to take these forced minimum distributions. At that age, the RMDs equal approximately 3.7% of your IRA balance. And then that percentage increases each and every year as you get older, as your life expectancy essentially gets shorter. You can calculate what you owe all by yourself by using IRS Publication 590, which gives you a uniform table with a government-assumed life expectancy for each age past age 70. Simply take the balance of your IRAs, 401ks, and all those qualified retirement accounts on December 31st of the previous year, divide it by this life expectancy factor from Pub 590, and voila, you have your RMD amount. This process is simpler than it used to be, but it's not completely simple. For instance, a separate formula exists for IRA owners whose spouses are more than 10 years younger, and generally their RMDs end up being less. There are other complications as well, but the penalty for not taking sufficient RMDs each year is a whopping 50%. So it's important to do your calculations correctly. The amount of extra tax liability you have because of these RMDs, that liability itself depends upon a whole bunch of different factors that are all surrounding your personal situation and how much income you have from other sources. However, the bottom line is this: the sooner you prepare the right strategy for taking RMDs, the better. In my experience, that means an asset allocation that enables you to satisfy your RMDs through interest or dividends without having to rely each year on capital gains. And if you're relying each year on capital gains in the current market environment, make no bones about it. It's really no different from spending down principal to distribute those RMDs, which, as you know, is a really slippery slope that you want to avoid. Your best chance of avoiding that slope is to work with a financial advisor who specializes in financial strategies specifically geared toward protecting principal and generating income through the form of interest and dividends. Now it's time to welcome our next guest, Michael Eastham, the founder of Fellowship Financial Group in Altamont Springs, Florida. Michael is also the author of best-selling book Common Sense Income Strategies. Michael, thanks for being back on the show. It's great to have you.
It's always a pleasure, Dave. Thanks so much for having me.
So I love having you on the show for two reasons. One, because you're a personal friend and I just enjoy visiting with you. And the other one is because we're talking about, as you know, taxes today. And a lot of financial advisors can talk about taxes in a tangential way, but being a CPA, you can add a lot more value. So first I'd like to ask you, what are you seeing now under the new tax code? Some people are winning, some people are losing under the new tax code. Now that it's actually the rubber's meeting the road and taxes are getting done, how are people faring out overall?
I think one of the things that we're seeing is that folks who are in the middle class, they're actually seeing some tax savings. So some of those folks have taken it early in the year in that they adjusted their withholdings from their pay stub, from their paychecks, and so they're seeing it up front. But others who are, they don't have a lot of deductions, they're really benefiting because the standard deduction has dramatically increased, especially for married couples. So that's having a pretty big impact.
But have most people changed their withholding, or have they not, and they're just getting kind of a bonus now when they get a refund?
Yeah, most people have not changed their withholdings. A few that are a little proactive. In February last year, they went right ahead and made some changes, but most people are kind of waiting. It was kind of like, anticipation throughout the year to see what Santa Claus is going to bring them come tax time. So that's what we're seeing.
Well, and economically speaking, as you help them right now change your withholding exemptions for this year, finally the president might get that stimulation of the economy that he wants as people get more money in their paycheck each and every month, or at least that's what you and I would certainly hope for. Michael, we need to take a quick commercial break, so please don't go away. We'll be back with more here on The Income Generation. You're watching David Scranton and Michael Eastham. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We're talking with Michael Eastham, best-selling author and founder of Fellowship Financial Group in Altamont Springs, Florida. If you don't know where that is, Orlando, Florida. Michael, thanks for sticking around.
It's great to be here, Dave.
So a lot of people benefited from the tax law. I get that, but I know a few people were hurt. who are the types of people, generally speaking, that maybe you're paying a little more tax now after the Trump tax plan got passed into law?
I think some of the people that we're seeing are people who maybe they've got a few kids, they're higher income earners, and they had just a marginal amount of itemized deductions, because those people are getting, they're no longer itemizing, for one, but they also don't get the personal exemptions that they were getting before the tax cut kicked in. So those are the folks that are getting a little bit of a surprise.
Or I'm sure some of your out-of-state clients, the snowbirds, if you will, who haven't quite yet declared residency in Florida, who have maybe from the Northeast, they have a high income tax, be it New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, or high property tax, and now they're limited as to what they can take.
Shh. We're trying to slow down the flow of those people from coming to Florida because we don't have a state income tax. So yeah, there is a big difference in of course those big tax states that they're getting hit pretty hard, especially if for those folks that are not able to take the state and local income tax deduction like they used to.
I know I don't know why you're trying to slow down, the flow. I mean, so what if, I come to your home for some great well-made homemade pizza and it takes me 5 hours instead of 3 hours? What's the big deal, right? Why would we want to slow down the flow?
Hey, if you're passionate about pizza, then it's worth the trip.
It's worth the 5 hours for your pizza, Michael. Absolutely. But in the minute or so we have left, what are some good tax savings ideas that maybe our viewers haven't heard so far under the new tax code that you think still makes sense for our income generation viewers?
Well, actually, there's a couple of really good ones, and one specifically that sticks out in my mind. If you're over 70 and a half and you're taking your required minimum distributions, and you used to be able to benefit by contributing to a charitable organization, well, now you're itemizing. There's something called a qualified charitable distribution that allows you to take the money from your IRA or qualified account, directly donate it to a charitable organization, and you don't have to report that money as income, but it counts as your required minimum distribution. So it has the same net effect of those charitable contributions.
That's a great strategy. 15 seconds left. Any other words of wisdom for our income generation members?
I think it's important for people to spend some time and be proactive about planning, especially for 2019 and beyond. There are some great opportunities to take advantage of, and you don't want to miss out, but you need to be proactive.
And change your withholding exemptions, because giving an interest-free loan to the government is not smart business. Michael, thanks so much for being on the show again. And
My
thank
pleasure.
you. Stick with us. We'll be back in just a moment here on The Income Generation. I'd like to thank our guests for joining us for another episode of The Income Generation, but I'd also like to thank you, our new and returning viewers. As I noted at the top of the show, it's probably safe to say that there aren't many people who think of doing taxes as actually fun. In fact, quite the opposite. They're complicated, they're frustrating, and very often they don't seem fair. But they're also a legal obligation, so in the end, there's absolutely no escaping them. As the old saying goes, death and taxes. But as with anything else, the more you know about a topic, the more control that you have over that topic. And obviously there's a lot to know and understand about taxes, especially with the biggest overhaul of the U.S. tax code in 30 years now in place. And especially if you're retired or within 10 years of retirement. You should know, for instance, how your different sources of retirement income are actually taxed, from Social Security to pensions to your 401k. You should know how taxes work with traditional IRAs compared to Roth IRAs, and how one option might be better for you than the other. You should know how things have changed for retirees and near retirees under the new tax code, and what changes you might have to make in order to minimize any negative impacts. You should know how important it is to have the right strategy in place for satisfying your required minimum distributions. And ideally, you should have it in place long before you actually have to start taking RMDs, which is sooner than most people realize. Hopefully today's show has served to educate you about these and some other important topics. And hopefully you'll use this information as motivation to educate yourself further and to review your overall retirement strategy with the help of a qualified financial advisor. That, of course, means an advisor who specializes in asset protection and investing for income. Thanks for watching. If you're close to retirement and you really want to know how to protect and maximize your money, it's absolutely essential that you stay informed and up to date. And right here is where you can do it, right here on the Income Generation. I'm David Scranton, and we'll see you next week.
For behind-the-scenes photos, retirement planning tips, and upcoming giveaways, follow the Income Generation Show on Facebook. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel to watch video clips, guest interviews, and to catch up on past episodes. David J. Scranton, Amazon bestselling author, money manager, and national TV host, is on a mission to educate baby boomers about the need to shift from growth to income. If you're at or near retirement, focusing on income over growth can make all the difference in the quality of your retirement. Each week, David educates America on his Newsmax TV show, The Income Generation, where he provides special reports and more to teach baby boomers about the income model.
Call now for a free copy of David's latest book. Go to soundincomestrategies.com/income to find out more.